Button Action Definition in Form Studio gives you the power to create new and exciting business processes. If we look at the standard peer receiving form on the Save button, we can get a pretty good example of what an action definition looks like. We have sequence 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. We're doing a peer receipt. We actually have it twice here, one for non-serialized and one serialized. And this is for reasons of collecting serial numbers versus collecting lot numbers or no lot numbers. So under the serialized, we have a formula that only fires if the serial lot flag is equal to S, and the non-serialized will fire if the serial lot flag is not S. Serial lot FG is a variable that I collect further up in the form. So just to go through a couple of action options, we can choose to close the form, which obviously would be a close action. The form will just shut down. If we choose to clear the form, we have a couple options. We can just standard clear the form, and if we do that, it'll clear up to our first clear stop, or we can clear to, and we can choose which field we want to clear the form up to. So we'll start from the bottom and start clearing all the fields up until it hits the field you define here. We can choose to print a document. So printing the document goes into our standard document management under options. And so if we go to, say, peer receiving, our doc type is LPO, and we click next, this is going to go into our doc management. It pulls down the first document to get the parameters out of the crystal report or the nice label, depending on what you're using. So then I would just map whatever variable I want to map to this. So if I come down here, I have a variable for receiver, next, item or product category. If you look in our document management, you can have item, product category, customer, or customer type. This one only has item and product category, so I would just choose which field contains that, either one of those, so that it knows which document to print depending on what you've mapped for which item. And so we'd have a print document. I could do a formula. So formulas allow us to validate data. So if I want to have a formula in here, I can either choose no criteria. For whatever reason, it's always a true. I just want to set some data or call a function. I can chuck in here and say maybe if unit measure is equal to cases, then if that's true, I can set any field in the form. So these are all fields in the form, or I can look at variables. I can set those equal to some piece of data. So some test variable here. I can set to another field on the form or another variable, or I can call a function call. Or if I say false, I can have a message box, like an informational box, hard message box, a soft message box, or I can also flip the logic around on that. I can do a SQL event. So SQL events allow us to do a select statement. So if we wanted to go look at a table, a value, and a column in the table and see what the value is, we can bring that data back. So we have a nice little SQL builder here. So if I want to go out here and look at the item master, and I wanted to look to see if, again, if I want to bring back the unit measure maybe, and bring that into a field called test. So if I come down here, it's going to bring it back as test. I can do a validation error message that will fire if nothing is returned. Of course, I probably want some kind of where clause here, where item number is equal to, maybe I want to look at the item number on the form. Maybe I want to tell it's an invalid item. SQL script, this allows me to call insert, update, delete statements. So if I want to maybe update the item master and set the unit measure equal to each, where item no is equal to the item number. I could do a SQL commit. So when all these actions fire off, they're going to fire off in a transaction wrapper. If for whatever reason I want to commit along the way, the commit will do a SQL commit and then restart the transaction wrapper. I can open a form. So if I wanted to open any other form that has been built, I can open the form and then pass parameters to those forms. I can do a validation transaction. These typically might be called underneath an item validation instead of a button click. But if I want to come in here and look at the receipt validate purchase order. So if I want to validate the purchase order, I would give it the order number. Maybe the release is just a 0, maybe it's not a blanket order, and then return data back. So this will do all the SQL work to validate the order, and it also does any kind of rules checking that are important to Moncola. So if it wants to know, it'll for instance return you the item requires inspection if the PO is an inspection type of item. Then business transactions. This allows us to then map transactions in the WiSys business transactions. So if I go to, in this case, PO receipt, and so here I can just start mapping fields from the form. So item or line number would be the, I have a variable called line number that I've collected further up in the form. So I just go through and map all these field properties, so the bin and serial out properties, map all these, and then if I go next, I can it'll return the receiver back then to a variable on the form. So if I want to bring that back into receiver variable. And then the SQL business transaction is just like the business transaction, but I define a SQL statement up here first. So this allows me to create a data set full of data, which will then return, and for however many records is returned in that data set, it'll call my business transaction that many times, so I can map the columns of that data set to the properties of the business transaction. An example here might be I want to scan a bin number and bring back all the lots in that bin, and then do a transfer every single lot to another bin. So that's the idea of button actions. Again, these are all by sequence. These will fire off in sequence, and they will fire off in one big SQL transaction wrapper. So it allows you to create new and exciting concepts, so you can actually link multiple business transactions together, as well as validation transactions, and create new events. Thanks for listening.